before we start the episode, if the content of the show is something that has been resonating with you, please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who you feel may need to hear it. This helps the show grow and helps us keep bringing this content out into the world. My guest today is Brian Muldoon. Among other things, Brian is the author of The Luminous One. Brian, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here, Jake.
Yeah, I appreciate you reaching out to me. And I said, among other things, because not only are you an author, you are a lawyer, and you were just telling me there are at times you are a judge as well.
Sometimes I'd sit in for judges who are on vacation or sick or holidays. Yeah.
Okay. So as I was saying to you before, in the interview, I love to read the books of my guests before they get on the show, but I just didn't have time to get to yours. But I am aware of what it's about. I've listened to interviews of you and other hosts describing the book, and you're reimagining the quote unquote lost years of Jesus's life through a fiction that's very much based in historical fact. Is that right?
Yeah. It tracks some historical details, events that occurred, but sometimes occurred at a very different time. So I use the facts fairly loosely and try to indicate that they are. Uh, yeah.
Okay. So before we get to that, though, I do want you to go over the book. I just find it very interesting that you, having the profession that you have to have a passion to go into law, but you also have to have a passion to be writing books about a subject such as this. So which came first? What was your life like, up till now, if you don't mind kind of giving us the gist of it?
Okay. It's been all over the place,
Yeah.
literally. Yeah. Um, well, initially, as a young child in a large Irish Catholic family, uh, 7 siblings and myself, I was very interested in becoming a priest, like many young Catholic boys, and with a lot of nudging from my mother, who basically believed that if she got one of her 3 sons to be a priest, that she would have a complete remit on anything she might have done during her life. So there was a little pressure to, you know,
Yeah.
get on there because mom wants a guaranteed place in heaven. But uh, they were very religious, very involved in a really thoughtful way in Catholicism. And so I grew up with that kind of in the back of my mind. I went to Catholic grade schools, high school, and college, um, and found it a deep, uh, deep well of wisdom in many ways, but also that it entertained a lot of myths or fantasies or outright misstatements without much regard for what was actually true. So eventually, I just realized that the path of the priesthood was not for me because I'd be spending my entire life kind of railing against the things that I considered to be out of line or unsupportable. So uh, I became what they call a fallen away Catholic, but basically uh, somebody who had a lot of questions about the whole Christian story. So that is what got me interested from a very early age in trying to understand what was really behind it, because there's so much that is beautiful about Christianity as it's practiced by those who take it seriously. The sense of compassion, generosity, forgiveness, nonviolence. These are all really important qualities. And you don't, in my opinion, you don't need to believe in supernatural stories in able to find those values compelling. So increasingly, there became kind of a rift between the laudable elements of Christianity and those that had become quite toxic. And not only that, but Christianity offered, when one looks at sort of the mystic side of it, offers a tremendous map, a way, a sense of direction for cultivating a rich inner life. So that's what typically the lives of saints or great mystics are most known for, is that uh, they wanted a direct relationship with what we call God, um, uh, that the supernatural and the divine could merge with the everyday, uh, the practical side, the secular. But in order to get there, you have to go through a lot of what we would call spiritual challenges, uh, primarily to get over our own ego, our desire to be important or wealthy, uh, things like that. So they laid out a path, and I was always very interested in what that path might be. And I would say in high school, I encountered the works of G.I. Gurdjieff, who was a Russian Armenian mystic in the 1920s, uh, who was a member of what he called the Seekers of Truth. They kind of wandered around Afghanistan and India looking for uh, some secret version of what was truth that only serious seekers would ever find. And that idea really I found compelling. The idea that somewhere there was some kind of secret or occult knowledge, and that we could access this. But
And,
go ahead.
and that was in high school that you started your interest in mysticism really came about, or was it before that even?
Well, I wanted to be a monk or a priest from the age of 5,
Okay.
but by the time I hit high school, I realized that my interest in the fairer sex would make that probably an impractical direction. It's
That's
actually
a
what,
good reason.
yeah. Well, I applied to enter the Maryknoll Missioners when I was 13.
What is that?
It's a sect of Roman Catholic priests who basically focus on proselytizing missionary work, mostly in the Far East, China, Japan, probably Africa. Uh, but, the idea that there was some very special message or teaching that lay in Christianity and needed to be spread around to people who'd be grateful for the instruction. That, was basically the idea of it. Although it turns out that generally people are not interested in becoming proselytized by other religions. They generally find something that's comfortable or ditch the whole thing. But most of us don't want to be preached to. But anyway, the priest who was interviewing me said, "Well, we'd be happy to have you. 13's kind of young, but but we do take people that early. But I was wondering if maybe you shouldn't see the world a little bit before that." And I said, "Well, isn't that the whole point of being a missionary is you get out there and you see the world?" He goes, "Well, not that world. I mean, girls. What do you think?" And I thought, I'm going to look into that. And so I'm I'm 74 now, still kind of looking into it. So
Yeah. Well, it was a
uh,
good tip.
yeah. Um, but I had a cousin who was a really kind of brilliant Jesuit priest, and he was working on his PhD and would send me books that he found interesting but didn't really relate to the topic of his doctoral work. And one of them was this guy Gurdjieff, who was kind of considered to be the first pioneer of the self-help world, because he had taken um, exercises from various traditions like Sufi dancing, where people work themselves into sort of an ecstatic trance. And he kind of downgraded that or made it more accessible to more people. So he would take fairly esoteric practices and impose them on the group of his followers. Uh, so
So, um, when you started to diverge, I'll say, from the beliefs of the church, Was it hard for you to talk about that, to express that to your mom, your parents, anybody else? Did you kind of were you in the closet for a while about it, or was you just have always been outspoken about it?
I would say I've always been outspoken about it. Um, because even in high school, the high school I went to was, in my opinion, very, very advanced. And the Catholic priests there, Jesuits, who are known for their scholarship, the Jesuits actually gave seminars on how to avoid the mythology of the Gospels, to distinguish what seemed to be true from an ethical or philosophical point of view, separate that from the just really good storytelling that the Gospels have. Uh, so that had a huge impact on me. The idea that you could demythologize uh, uh, the teachings of the church so that it would make actual sense. As you know, there's been a very long history in Christianity of trying to reconcile logic or reason with belief. Um, and it means that a lot of beliefs that are just the story, they're just the way the deeper truths may be delivered, uh, but they're not to be taken literally. And that's one of the primary challenges, I think, of many religious people these days is they try to take this stuff literally, and it's very little of it is literally true.
Well, why don't we do this? Because you do, at least from what I can tell in the interviews, a good job of presenting that side of things. So, for example, say with Jesus, who where I'm from at least, and I'm from a very rural area, small town, a lot of times the attitude is he's fully divine, born essentially not human, and that there's no chance you could ever aspire to be like Jesus. In fact, it's probably blasphemous to even think that you could be. But that's not what your book is presenting, it sounds like. Do you want to get into kind of just an overview of what the Luminous One is about and how,
Sure.
how you wrote it?
Yeah, and the idea behind the book uh, is very much what you talked about, which is restoring humanity to Jesus. In the fourth century, I'm forgetting the date exactly, but 365, 370, something like that. There was a major gathering of Christian leaders and bishops called the Council of Nicaea. And up until that point, what we now call Christianity had dozens of different versions. Uh, there was no set canon or grouping of scriptures that were regarded as being sacred. But Constantine, the emperor, uh, got very tired of all these bishops, many of whom had their own little private group of enforcers or thugs or armies. Uh, they were constantly fighting with each other over theological issues. And one of them was, is he human or is he divine? And they concluded he was both. Although, what the heck does that mean?
I was going to ask you that. What's their metric? I mean, and who are they to decide?
Well, exactly. These are the kinds of questions a thoughtful person would have. It's like, well, when you say he's God, what does that mean? Does it mean he never has to go to the toilet? He has no desire to, befriend women? What exactly does that mean? And plus, if he, as you said, if he is divine, what kind of exemplar is that? What would it's just going to make us all feel bad
Yeah.
because we're not going to be good or perfect, whatever that means. Um, so that in part, this book was well. Let me back up a moment. There's a gap in the gospel accounts of his life. You have the four primary gospels and the Gospel of John, and but none of them address who he was growing up. We get some birth narratives about the stable and the three wise men and stuff. But at the age of 12, when he supposedly was brilliantly lecturing uh, uh, the elders at the temple, from age 12 to age 30, when he was at the showed up for his first see and tell miracle at the wedding of Cana. There's 17, 18 years that are just not accounted for, no mention. So in this book, uh, I take those 17 or 18 years and say, well, if he did develop into an extraordinary spiritual being with the capacity to change lives, how would he have gotten there? What would have been the steps? What would have been his disappointments and his achievements? And it takes it through his final imprisonment in a jail cell, uh, being ready to be summoned to the cross, where he is in a conversation with an Israeli Jewish general who's been locked up, but who historically led a tremendous group of soldiers against the Romans and defeated them before he was in turn completely wiped out. Anyway, so it's a conversation about the utility of violence or nonviolence in the spiritual path and in dealing with oppressive political regimes. So that's kind of the landscape of it from age 12, 13 when he had his bar mitzvah to being on the precipice of death.
So, do you feel then, I mean, since there was a council, a group of men, human beings, who could decide, okay, yes, he is fully divine, fully human, they could decide something like that. Do you think that it was just decided, intentional, at some point, that these years be left out, that the Gospels, were there Gospels of this time? Are there any records of that time? And if so, were they just intentionally hidden away?
Well, there are a lot of gospels that don't even fall into that, the approved canon of scripture. Gospel of Thomas, a bunch of scrolls were discovered in the 1940s in Egypt called Nag Hammadi. Uh, and the Nag Hammadi scrolls include all kinds of things. So it wasn't like somebody sat down and said, let's figure out the chronology of this guy's life and where he went and what he did. That's not how people wrote at that time in the ancient world. These were all, they were not biographies in any meaningful sense. Um, I mean, just huge factual errors. For example, the idea that King Herod demanded the head of every small child, every male, because he had heard from the three magi that uh, there was some king that was born in Bethlehem and he better watch out. There, no such event ever happened. Um, what these are called? There's a tradition in Hebrew literature called midrash, and what you do is you take a valuable moral lesson. For example, follow God's will, start as a very humble person uh, with great spiritual attainments. Well, that's the story of Moses. And that essence was transferred into the story of Jesus. Again, born in a very humble way, and then launched into a career as being a powerful spiritual figure. So, we got to have a different attitude about the Gospels and recognize what is historically likely to be true and what is not. And there are many, many biblical scholars who've devoted entire careers to figuring out what really belonged and what did not.
What
And
do you
what was
think?
left out. Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Why do you think it is that so many who are claiming to be Christian, or I mean, willing to die on that claim, refuse to look into things like that? I mean, at least in my experience, it seems that there are plenty of those people out there that they're not even willing to look outside. Is it something as simple as just being as fear?
Well, fear is definitely part of it because part of a conventional Christian upbringing is to basically terrify children with the fear of going to hell and being consumed by eternal flames. That's part of it. And the other is uh, people are desperately afraid of death. As a species, it's great that we're conscious and as smart as we are, but that just enhances our exposure uh, to the experience of losing it all. And so, because of fear of death, um, and a lot of people are just not secure in their own searching, and or do it very poorly. And you would think everybody wants to know the absolute truth, but as my Christian friends tell me, uh, they've already decided what's true, and they don't need to think about it any further.
Yeah.
And of course, they're constantly being told to trust in faith and not in reason. This is, part of this sort of mind numbing, um, kind of subtle coercion of institutional religion, is making people believe that they have to turn their brains off
Yeah.
because otherwise it would make no sense. And it just absolutely doesn't when it's in many ways when it's examined rationally. So
What conversations, let's do you hope then that, because we don't need to preach to the choir, and that's kind of what I want my podcast to be about, was like I hope somehow I could at least have people who are on the fence with things maybe listen. Some people are not going to be, but what kind of conversations do you hope this will spark, particularly with religious people, if they were to read your book? What do you
yeah,
hope for that?
well, I think that they would very much resist reading the book.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had family members say, "I'm not going to read the book because it would challenge my faith." Uh, and my goal is not to challenge somebody's faith, but to have them open their minds just a little bit uh, in a contemplative way, a thoughtful way of increasing their true understanding and application of his example. I don't want to say his teachings because it was never clear to me that he absolutely saw himself as a teacher or somebody with a mission that he wanted to convert Israel somehow to a different relationship. Those are, to me, mostly things that are interpretations of the Gospels,
Yeah.
but
And
not necessarily true.
what really pinged for me was, and I know, like I say, I haven't read the book yet, but I've listened to you guys talk about it, would be the your portrayal of what he was doing in those times, traveling to India, studying, I guess, Buddhist philosophies, Taoism, things like that. And it seems as though, yes, this is a fictional book, but truth is the truth, and things that make sense, they make sense to our intuition, because Jesus, at least the version of Jesus that would be worth following, um, would embody these things, this type of compassion, this type of non-judgment that you find in Buddhism and philosophies that you hear in like Zen Buddhism and the little bit that I know about the Tao Te Ching, things like that. What uh, could you go over some of the things that are in the book where you say he's doing things like that? His learning journey in the book.
Yeah. Well, what I tried to do is have these encounters of his make sense from the point of view of the tradition that they come from. In other words, not to write off Buddhism as an easy answer to any problem that comes up, but to really look deeply into what is Buddhism really saying, or Hinduism or Taoism, as you say, or Greek mystical thought. So I tried to be true to that to the extent I understand any of those things. And the result was this, that in the story, he comes up with an understanding that underlies all of these traditions, which is the nature of emptiness. meaning our egos are weighty problems we drag around with us and that direct us in unconscious ways that we often regret. And the Eastern religions are very supportive of the notion that there is an experience that you can have that will help you transcend all that. And in the Gospels, there are a lot of references to the kingdom of heaven. Very little explanation as to what that means. But in this book, the kingdom of heaven is described essentially through his action and his travels as being a place of ultimate serenity, of true lasting peace, and that's what that kingdom is about. It's not about creating new institutions. It's not about over taking over the secular world. It's not about any of those things. It's about becoming what in Christianity you might call a holy person. So anyway, he focuses on that, the kingdom of heaven, and he heads back uh, to Israel um, as a result of a profound uh, experience that he has, and realizes that with all his traveling and studies with masters and stuff, he really misses his mother. And so he goes back and he just happens to run into people along the way who are kind of impressed about this kind of brilliant guy who's traveled to the Far East, which they would not in a million years consider going to. But this guy's been all over the place and he has some great stories about his travels. And it kind of pulls people in and it becomes a very uh, lively part. And you know how it is when you find a group of people who you feel really comfortable and compatible with. It's great to be with them, hang out, have conversations, test out your ideas, and that's what he was doing. I think, at least in this version, uh, it's what he could have been doing, because that's sort of how you grow up in on the spiritual path.
Yeah. And I love that you're presenting the human side that it had to be. 'Cause I'm even I was at a point in my life where I'm like, I don't even know whether Jesus existed or not, because you've probably seen the comparisons between the Egyptian deity Horus and Jesus,
Hmm.
their story, and I
Yeah,
don't know how much of it's true, but it just the fact that it opened my mind to, yeah, it is possible. They could have totally borrowed this story, and now they've presented through the religion their Messiah that's unattainable to the people, and this threat of hell, and they have a perfect control mechanism. And because Jesus would be, at least in a lot of people's eyes, nothing but divine, unattainable, and there's the only hope for us is to say we promise we believe in him, and he's the only Son of God, and oh, on top of that, he is God wrapped in flesh, and we're also all sons of God. And there's this big confusing mess and it felt like it was orchestrated intentionally that way for control. Um, so that you're presenting this idea that yes, he was a human being, and yes, we can at least aspire to be like that. That's what it would mean to follow Christ. And in fact, I'm a songwriter, and there are certain times where I feel like I'm channeling because one of the lines was the Christ will not return unless you express it. And I feel like, yeah, there's going to be a return of the Christ, but it's going to be a consciousness level that's going to start to arise in people. And it really feels like that is happening. And it's because of books like yours. And in fact, it really sounds like the version of Jesus that you can read about in A Course in Miracles. Are you familiar with the Course?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So I
one of
loved that. I'm like, this sounds
yeah,
like the Course.
yeah,
A beautiful version and imagining. But I don't think if he existed, which, I'm no Bible scholar by any means, then this sounds like who he would have been and someone worth following.
yeah. Well, it'd be somebody you'd want to follow,
Yeah.
somebody you'd want to believe in, and but believing in a much more everyday kind of mundane way. Like, I believe in what you're doing. What you're doing is really cool and it's important. Like, when he first ran away from home at age 13 while in Afghanistan, he ends up going down to the Ganges River and he sees this huge ritualistic bathing that happens down there during a big event called the Kumbh Mela. And so all the religious stuff is going on, but the untouchables are starving in the midst of all this. And people don't want to have anything to do with them. And he goes, no, that's not right. So you would want to be friends with somebody who really went out of his way to help other people because that's somebody you could really trust. And there's something called the mystical body of Christ. I don't know if you're aware of that, but in
No.
in Christian theology, there's this idea that people who actually walk that path have a deep and fundamental connection to one another, and it all helps lift up their own awareness or consciousness. That's in a way how he comes back is through those who share that deep level of compassion, love, and care for others.
Yeah. That sounds very similar to the idea of the transmorphogenic field. I think it
Mm.
was Rupert Sheldrake. Have you heard of that?
I
Yeah,
had,
like since we are connected, when one raises, it helps raise the others, especially if you seem to be focused on a certain frequency of living, vibration of living like that. I haven't heard of that. Could you, for me and the audience, I want to hear your definition of mysticism. Because some people have the wrong idea about that, at least where I'm from.
yeah, yeah. It's not mystical in the sense of magical. It's mystical in the sense that it's not confined to our three-dimensional awareness, I would say. The mystic, to me, uh, and I want to talk about sort of my teacher in this way, Brother Wayne Teasdale. Um, the mystic is someone who wants to merge with the divine. The divine, kind of very generally described as a level of awareness that's beyond what we can in our conceptual 3D reality uh, understand. So, mystics of all kind, to me, are looking to merge that kind of divine consciousness with their everyday life. Whereas a lot of what people call Christianity is not an inner experience; it's an external kind of experience where God's over here and I'm here, and if I follow these rules all laid out in a pamphlet that's been given to me, then somehow something really great's going to happen. Anyway, the mystic wants the personal experience. The mystic wants, well, like there was an article just a couple of days ago in the New York Times about people who have experienced near-death experiences. And I would say that's a pretty good definition of a mystic is someone who sort of has had an experience, kind of one of grace, to be able to experience things on a completely different level. And these folks are, I think most of them ended their affiliation with organized religion because they found the thing that they were really looking for, which was confidence that things are all right in the world and
Yeah.
we don't need to worry about what happens when we die. So,
Yeah. I mean, I've read hundreds, maybe even thousands of near-death experiences. I've interviewed a few of them here. That's what I thought the show was going to be, and another podcast on the near-death experience. But absolutely, and just reading those things is enough to change you. That used to be my basis for spirituality was because
uh-huh.
here's some evidence. These people, a lot of them have a lot to lose by saying these things, and they're saying things like what your version of Jesus and the Jesus in, sorry, in the book, you call him Jesse, is that right?
Well, yeah, Jesse,
Okay.
his actual his actual name, I believe, was Yeshua,
Yeshua.
which is
Yeah.
an Aramaic name. He got to Jesus because they tried to transliterate his name from Aramaic or Greek into Aramaic. So, but yeah, so we called him
Yeah.
Jesse because that's, you could say, well, no, this wasn't really about Jesus. It was about some other guy who
Yeah.
starts with J.
But what it sounds like he's teaching is what these people learn in these near-death experiences. They get a fast track to this truth that a lot of people seem to be searching for. And it's just and it's right there. It's right under our nose the whole time. In fact, you seek too hard and you don't see it. You look right past it. But what a great message and a great idea for the book. Also, you mentioned the kingdom of heaven and his Yeshua's definition of the kingdom. Um, but you didn't get into that definition. What is the kingdom of heaven according to this version?
Yeah, it's the inner state like one would have after a near-death experience. It's the inner state of peace, of living fully within yourself. A lot of times I think that the word spirituality is kind of misleading because it suggests something different from what we actually experience. So the idea I've been using lately is something called a fully alive human being. That's what spirituality really means, is that you are alive, and when people are around you, they get that crazy sense of connection to something, beyond. So instead of seeing things as a Hindu or a Buddhist or whatever, he includes this idea of the kingdom of heaven. That's where we're really headed. That's the experience that that he had and that he wanted others to have.
That's what I would hope when people read your book. One of the things, one of the main things they would take from it, because when a person realizes that, and I feel like because for decades I've been dancing around philosophies and the idea of what spirituality is and what it means to be a spiritual person and kind of intuitively even feeling, Jake, you're looking too hard and you're actually getting in your own way, maybe even intentionally on some level, but it's right here, right now, and it's through the present moment that you pull in that being a complete human being. Um, and I agree with you that that term of spirituality even makes it sound like something beyond your day-to-day life, really, which we are spirit, we are soul, we're energetic beings. So, and we came here, at least I believe, to the planet to work out as souls. So everything we do down here, I guess, is a spiritual practice because we're spirits practicing whatever it is that we wanted to do to foster our expansion. Um,
Mhm.
where are you at in things like that? I'm curious. Like, what is it that you believe now? If you could sum it up.
I would have a really hard time summing it up.
Yeah.
I really would because um, I live in a sort of interstitial space between belief and hope. Uh, that that I think that the challenge that we face at this time in history, because we've gone through a lot of cultural uh, deconstruction of organized religion, we need to find a way to express those wonderful gifts uh, that religions can offer without having to pay as a price of admission, surrendering to beliefs that are unsustainable. So for me, uh, it's where I am now is just trying to construct um, an experienced worldview that is useful to those who are in need. It is helpful. It is beautiful and it's good. The kind of the Greek virtues, the good, the true, and the beautiful. So I'm it for me it's an everyday experience and trying to keep it all fresh, not not giving in to the temptation to say, "Oh, here's the answer. It's this." So there are some books called "The Mystical Language of Unsaying," and it kind of describes how I feel about my place these days. Uh, basically the proposition in the volume book is uh, when a mystic is referring to this experience of connecting with the divine, there are no words for it. So you have to do a little dance when you're trying to talk about it or think about it. And the dance is I and God are one. We are the same. And then, oh, but of course, I'm not God. So there's this a dialectic process of saying this is what's true. Well, it's actually not true, but
Yeah.
it's usefully true. Like irrational numbers. Where are they? Where did they exist? Well, they're useful for calculation, but you're just not going to find them in the world that we experience. So I'm engaged in a little dance with the whole idea of the kingdom of heaven and the mystical union and all that. Yes, it's true. Not, well, not exactly.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I get you. Um, how about your internal experience, your internal state? Are you someone who lives in a state of peace? I mean, I know everybody doesn't all the time, but have you cultivated that to where it's maybe even close to being your baseline experience, and then maybe you get pulled out here and there?
that's a great kind of question because I don't know. I meditate every day religiously. Um, I do what I can to support those who are doing good work in the world, but I'm also a lawyer, and
Yeah.
so that's not easy to reconcile with all this. I just had a 4-day trial, and you in the process of one of these trials, you often have to accuse and prove that somebody's a liar. And so it's not like sitting down and having an exalted conversation with somebody. It's trying to get at the truth of what really happened in a way that hopefully helps my client as well.
Yeah, I bet.
So that another level of kind of the dialectic of yeah, love all beings. One of Yeshua's mottos is um, love everyone, everywhere, all the time.
It, that's another thing that's always almost triggered me into anger is, and I don't know who or what I'm getting angry at, but just the fact that just being a parent, I'm like, yeah, well, Jesus, great job, but I don't. You aren't a parent. At least that's not what is being presented. All it takes is for your kids to bring their problems into your life and the impossible situations they give you to just lose it all. Wake up and we're pretty religious meditators in the morning, and we get our level of Zen going, and then boom, as soon as life starts, it's just all out the
Yeah,
window so easily. It's so
yeah,
slippery. So I can
yeah.
imagine being a lawyer, how you must do you sometimes during trial or whatever, all the aspects of being a lawyer, find yourself drawing on those tools, whatever they may be, to cultivate that clarity and sense of peace and sense of purpose.
I do. I mean, it's, I have like little mental processes I go through when things become really stressful, as they sometimes do, called the ABCs. First, all is well. That's A. B, be bold, be brave. It's the second. And C is be confident. And constantly bringing those to mind helps with the crazy world we live in, with society unraveling right before us. But most importantly, trying to raise kids without going completely insane.
Are
It's not.
you have kids?
I have 7 grandkids and 3 kids of my own who are all awesome as can be.
Uh-huh. And have you, is this something you've taught them? Because you grew up Catholic and they grew up with you.
Yeah,
So how's that been as a parent?
they've kept me honest.
Uh-huh.
There was a point where many former Catholics that I've run into, well, when they have kids, they'll say, well, I think they need to have some kind of grounding in one of the established religions. So we're going to get them started on that. And if they want to break away later on, well, my kids were not that way at all. I took them to a mass, and I remember one of my kids, who was maybe 7 at the time, he goes, Dad, what are we doing here? He goes, you don't believe this. He says, why would you try to introduce us to something you don't even believe yourself? And actually, uh, when he was 5, he had just started kindergarten, one of my sons. And he came to me one day and he said, Dad, I have to ask you a question. He said, the priest comes in. He was a little Catholic school. He says, the priest comes in on Fridays and he gives us a little talk. And he said that there once was a guy who people killed, but then he came back to life. Is that true? And I like really struggled with it, and I was thinking, why tell that to a 5-year-old kid? So I gave him every version of the story I could think of, and he listened very carefully. And then he looked up at me and he goes, I find that very difficult to believe.
At 5.
At 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my kids were the same way. They had questions immediately, and that's just what I get. I don't know. It doesn't really frustrate me, but I have my wife was brought up religious. I was not. Um, so dealing with those questions, it was never really a big deal to me. My parents were pretty straightforward with, they were pretty open with that. But just the fact that it doesn't take long. You don't even have to be not even close to being fully developed to where it doesn't even make sense. Um, and in the area where I live too, it's highly valued, this folksy common sense. You don't even have any common sense, and it's really valued. But I'm like, yeah, we have common sense with everything until it comes to this, and you just throw it all out the window. And why would we be given rationality and reason and sense, and then be said, well, don't use it in this case? In the one case that might matter more than anything, this is where you don't use it.
Yeah. That, which is crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
it makes me think that people have discovered a trick about adopting positions that are clearly false. I think it has a neurological impact. I think when you basically tell your brain, look, you're off duty right now. You don't need to think about this. I am just going to accept as true something that's patently, obviously not true. Does it kick off some kind of dopamine hit that somehow the idea of believing something that's simply not true, uh, it, it must do something
Yeah.
because so many people are willing to do it. But you do raise, I think, a really important point, which is if you insist on changing your views from those you were raised with, uh, it's going to have a consequence in terms of uh, your relationship with friends and family. Because when people kind of step in and say, I'm going to figure this thing out for myself and I'm going to use my best reason and look for real evidence, you're going to end up with a different crew of people you hang out with. Because many people who go through this process lose their families,
Yeah.
which is tragic.
My wife is going through this, not to that degree, but there's friction. So, for people like her, are there things that you would recommend, maybe, as you're a lawyer, arguing points? I don't want to call it arguing points, but like, what about this? How can you deny this? Is there anything you found that's going to matter to someone who's just like, no, I'm not listening to anything. I'm in the box and I'm staying in?
I haven't found anything so far. I,
Interesting.
I had uh, coffee recently with a good friend of mine who's a evangelical pastor. And I said, I want to know if there's something I can say about these things that you would be open to. And his answer was nothing. There's there's no common ground here. I'm not interested in going away from my beliefs because I have found the pearl of great price. And once you've found the pearl of great price, don't look, you know, you're done. You got it.
The pearl of great price, I can assume I know what it means, but what does that mean?
Well, to him, what it meant was that he discovered that his experience was that he's in the hands of a loving God who gives his life purpose and who is guaranteed that he will never die. So, kind of the conventional Christian story was for him what he really wanted and needed. And the truth is, a lot of people benefit and change their lives for the better as a result of their adherence to some of these beliefs. So, say somebody who's a recovering alcoholic and attributes the recovery to, his Christian support group. I mean, why would you take it away from him? I would just say that one of the hardest things to do when you're on the path, whatever path that is how you deal with people who are sort of in line behind you, the people who haven't had the experiences or the thoughts that you've had, and to not be contemptuous of them. Because, you know, politically and socially and religiously, people are very highly sensitive to being criticized by other people. That, they feel that you're just treating them badly. So they tend to shut down. So
Well, I was going to ask you this as well. On this path, the path of like the character in the book, Yeshua, or say of the Jesus in A Course in Miracles, who is saying that the kingdom of God is within you. You don't need a middleman to have a relationship with God. In fact, in a sense, you are God. You're not, but you are. Um, when you're immersed in that, is it important at all to even bother with trying to change anyone else's mind at all?
yeah, I think there's no point in trying to change somebody else's mind. I mean, if somebody comes to you and says, Jake, I just realized you mentioned that Course in Miracles. Uh, could you tell me more about that? I mean, if somebody does that, then
Mhm.
then they're open.
Yeah.
Um, uh, One of my other projects is called Mind University, which is an online, kind of an extensive online program for learning to think more clearly and more effectively and defend our minds from both our bad thinking and uh, the inquiries and pressures of the outside world. How do we keep from being mere consumers into people who can think effectively? And so what we have found in that work is that unless somebody is a little bit open, there's not a thing you can do. It's, People at a certain point don't care what's true, and they're very comfortable living in a world where from their point of view, it doesn't matter. And that's tragic. I feel like it's a betrayal of who we are as human beings. And I can't imagine any advanced spiritual being who would endorse the idea of, well, a, 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 a good lie is better than a bad one. And you should, if it's effective in getting people into the church, well, then use it.
Yeah.
But but that's part of the struggle, don't you think? Is
Yes. It's
how
knowing it's not just with that issue, but knowing how much to engage with this insane world, depending on how you want to look at it, what you want to focus on. It's an insane world, and sometimes I feel very pulled to do something about it. And there's another side of me that's saying all you can do is walk your path and take care of your internal state, and maybe that's enough, if there is this field that we're all connected to, if more of us would just try to raise our frequency, our vibration of living higher, it might influence the others. But I'm also like, well, is that just spiritual bypassing? Is it like passive it? I don't know how to balance it. Do you struggle with that at all?
Well, yes, I do because I believe that taking action is really important. Actually, that's how we establish a higher level of consciousness is through action. Um, and all the sort of gurus who are telling us the way to increase our consciousness, it doesn't last unless we do something that kind of causes it all to gel. And that something is service to others, I think, just as a general matter. So it may not look like there are any great outcomes, but you're taking care of your inner state for the benefit of others and not just yourself.
And I'm really feeling that these days. And well, like the podcast is one of the ways. It's like this has always felt like a calling. I used to be a teacher. It was I taught it was public school, middle school, but it wasn't teaching wasn't what I imagined it was going to be. It started to feel impossible. But I love teaching and I love kids, but teaching the curriculum that's handed to you, not so much. And so I thought, you like to talk, why don't you teach the things that you love? And even better, not really even being a teacher, more of a facilitator. And I get to be a student through this too. It so comes to me all the time. This podcast is a mirror for me. If anybody else benefits, that's great. But the guests come at the right time. Just meeting you now, hearing the message that comes through this book, and what's going on in my own life and the way I'm starting to practice and apply it. The guest that I have next week, she's going to be talking about things very similar to what you're talking about. So I thought that's just perfect that I've got Brian on. I can kind of get acquainted with this information, and then I'm going to be ready to go for next week. It just, these synchronicities seem to be happening more and more. And that's something that I was taught would when you're on the path and living this life of non-judgment and compassion, you start to see that you not see, but well, maybe see, but experience that yes, you aren't a separate part of the universe. You're God, but not God. You are the universe, but you're also an individual aspect of it as well. And you're seeing how that it works through you. And life's become magical and fun again. Because for a while there, for me, it was not. My 20s were terrible. I went through a long dark night of the soul. I knew about all this stuff intellectually, but for whatever reason, resisted doing anything. I knew about meditation, but I didn't meditate. I just wanted to talk about it, and somehow that made me feel as though I had a leg up on people or something. But I was miserable in the meantime.
But what got you into it? How did you
Into
know?
actually doing something, I was tired of being miserable. I was tired of being me. I guess I hit bottom in a sense. I wasn't suicidal or anything, but I was constantly fantasizing about what comes after death. I actually had some experience. I had out of body experiences in my 20s. Now, I was already someone who was very obsessed with ideas of spirituality. Um, and when the out of body experiences came, I became obsessed with that and getting out. And I feel like if we have a spiritual team, guides up there, angels watching us, they're essentially like, okay, shut that off because he's not even paying attention to life. That's all he's caring about is getting out. And I kind of understand what some of the near death experiencers are talking about when they come back. They're in this deep depression of they saw the beauty of what it means to be experiencing unity and real connection and truly unconditional love. And to come back here, we're so small, heavy, dense, and separated is almost unbearable. But what changed was I was tired of feeling it. And I could say that to my kids a lot too. It's like, well, when the discomfort of this thing that you're feeling is enough, you'll change because, they're the ones perpetuating these problems. And I don't know how it could be any other way, really.
Yeah. Well, I salute you for taking the path that you have, because
Well,
you
thank you.
you obviously know this stuff, and I'm sure as a teacher of people who are interested in being taught, the spiritual seekers that you're going to encounter, they'll be very grateful for having you in their lives. So
Well, I'm
good.
grateful for the guests because I feel like it makes it even easier. It's like I just got to find the teachers, have a conversation, and push it out into the world. But I do feel like it's a step towards something else. I never dreamed of being a podcaster. I mean, that didn't even exist then, but it's interesting how it unfolded. As soon as I chose to leave teaching and step into a life where I had to lean on faith in something, not just talk about it, everything opened up. I mean, I'm painting houses now. I paint barns. I paint houses.
Right.
It's what I do for money, but it's not what I am. But I've never been more fulfilled in life and had a sense of peace. There's no security. There never was, I guess I realized. But and I think a lot of people they fall into that. I know they do, especially teachers. There are a lot of teachers there that they're miserable. They
Yeah.
shouldn't be teaching either, but they stay because there's a pension if they stay long enough. That may or may not be there, and they may or may not live long enough to see that pension.
Right.
So that wasn't enough for me. And anymore, my wife and I say it's like, well, my our retirement plan is that the universe has got our back, and I know that that's it's a two-way street. You've got to pull the right levers and have that relationship with it, but that's where we are in life, and it's at least been interesting. It's been really fun.
Well, that's great. It's really good. Yeah.
Well, if I'm so glad that you reached out to me. I'm always so honored when someone finds me. um, what I always ask this to all my guests, what gives you hope today?
Um, because I believe that the more deeply we fall off the path, the more conflict we create increases the chance that something new will emerge, something really solid, something really beautiful. And I think, a lot of people have talked about this epoch, this time as being a time of transformation. Well, transformation is no easy thing. I mean, just getting our own individual lives together is hard enough. But but in the ever presence of conflict and irrationality and meanness, I think more and more people are going to be pulled uh, to do something meaningful about it. And the path, uh, the Greeks talked about a dialectic that you start off at A and then it's the opposite of A, and then they merge in some way and they create a new B or C or something. Anyway, that's what happens with so conflict leads to synthesis. So all the opposed forces that feel like they're opposing forces, I believe eventually will be reconciled. How soon that will be, who knows? But I believe ultimately things work out.
Well, I love
So
that. I'm with you on that too. Specifically because almost like I said, my personal experience is what I was tired of feeling the way I felt. Things weren't working for me. Everywhere I turned, nothing spoke to me. Nothing seemed to have any soul. Things were empty. And I think collectively, people are looking around and feeling the same way. And you can just feel something birthing, gestating, and ready to be born. And like you said, who knows how long it'll take. But I'd like to be around to be at a point where you can at least feel like, hey, we've come out of the smoke, the smoke's clearing, and since we lived through it, we can look back and have perspective and appreciation for what we've gone through and how far we've come. But who knows? Maybe the grandkids will see that. I don't know.
right, right.
Yeah.
I hope they do. I hope it's
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, if people, because you've got more going on than this book, which again, the Luminous One is the book. If people want to reach out to you, see what all the other things are that you're doing, what's the best way for them to find information on you?
Well, I've got a couple of websites. My legal one is brianmuldoonlaw.com. Uh, but mind mind-university.com is another one. That's a year-long cognitive training program, and people can take pieces of it, not the whole thing. But the whole course, it's pretty transformative. So those would be the same. And why don't I shoot you my emails, and they can also do that.
Sure. And I'll put that in the show notes.
Okay.
All
Yeah,
right.
that'd be
Well,
great.
again, thank you for being here, for reaching out to me. Thank you for the work you're doing in the world. I was thinking about this today. I'm like, maybe that is a good sign because, lawyers get a bad rap for being liars and, sleazy. But I'm like, here we have, look at this lawyer here. So maybe things are taking a turn when we've got these enlightened lawyers. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Well,
thanks, Jake, and
yeah.
really, congrats for all the work you're doing and your own development and what you're sharing.
You take care.
Okay, man. You too.
We were doing just fine in the life that we were living. Happiness flowed in peaceful abundance. Fruit grew fat on the vine, and the life that it was given was the same that filled the chambers of my heart. And we spoke most of the time of the workings of the spirit, how to see, how to hear some voice. And there in the breeze I heard, you can never be alone. There is nothing you can do that would mean you fail. Remember, this world is not your home. This truth leaks slowly from a smile behind the veil. Flowers bloom outside my door in geometric perfection, soft as lace upon my baby daughter's cheek. I couldn't take it anymore and sent my hectic collection of empty thoughts away with the wind. It shook me to the core. A spiritual connection came to me and it felt like a whisper. And there in the breeze I heard, you can never be alone. There is nothing you can do that would mean you fail. Remember, this world is not your home. This truth leads slowly from a smile behind the veil. But what about fear?